Hello Wargamers and welcome. Today we're going to talk about Thousand Suns and the Great Magnus. We're going to cover Magnus as he pertains in every single detachment. So this is going to be pros, cons, how he synergizes with it, and my general thoughts about each one. So first, let's have an overview of Magnus himself. His stat line, fairly simple. Movement 14, which is a very high movement. Ranged weapons, he has the Gaze of Magnus, or correction, going back to stat line, movement 14, toughness 11, 2-up armor save, 4-up invuln save, 16 wounds, leadership 5, OC 6. So this stat line, movement 14, he is very quick, he can move over things, he is very, very agile and mobile. Toughness 11. Anti-tank weapons are going to be good against him. Most small arms and medium arms aren't going to be the greatest. However, his 2-up, 4-up save is where that saves it. 4-up invulns are always nice. You look at custodians where they live or die by the 4-up. 16 wounds is a very high wound pool. Very few data sheets have more than 16 wounds. Leadership 5 is one of the lowest leaderships we have, so you really don't have to worry about him ever being battle shocked. Even at -2, you need to roll a 7, which is the most likely one to roll for leadership. OC 6, so he will outscore most 5-man min squad elite units or non-battle line units. Ranged weapons, he has his Gaze of Magnus, which is at 24 inches, 3d3 attacks. So on average with 3d3, you're going to be rolling 6 attacks. Ballistic skill of 2-up, so you're going to hit with almost everything. Strength 11, so everything except tougher tanks are going to be wounded on 3s. AP -2, damage 3, devastating wounds, and psychic, which works great with some of our detachments. 6 inches Firestern, 24 inches, d6 plus 3 attacks. Ballistic skill 2-up, strength 6, AP 1, damage 2. Blast ignores cover psychic, which makes it great for clearing marine bodies. Because of the ignores cover, the AP 1 is always going to be there. And of course, with Thousand Suns, we have our rituals so that we can reroll hits extremely easily, and we can get bonus AP, so our AP is always going to be effective. His melee weapons, he has 7 attacks with his strike at weapon skill 2-up. Strength 16, AP 3, damage 3. Just a solid profile, very baseline. It's not like you're gonna be doing Angron or Angron spiking high. It's just a very solid, and it's psychic and it has inbuilt devastating wounds. And his sweep is 14 attacks at weapon skill 2-up, strength 8, AP 1, damage 2. Great for marine bodies, traffic equivalents, but you're probably just going to be striking most of the time when you're using him. Continuing with Magnus, we have his abilities. He has Deep Strike, Deadly Demise, D6, which is a very high Deadly Demise, Cabal of Sorcerers, which is our army rule that lets us do rituals. Now, he can attempt 2 rituals every turn, every shooting phase, and he gets +2 to the cast. So, if you want your Twist of Fate, move second Temporal Surge, or any of your other rituals to go off, Doombolt, he is a great one to go because at +2 you're more likely going to be getting the higher one. Now, he has his Crimson Cane ability, which you're going to pick one at the start of the battle round. So this can go off before your opponent's turn if you are going second. You have -1 damage to Magnus. So anything that attacks Magnus is -1 damage. You're probably going to be in that one most of the time, rounds 2 to 5, because it just makes him that much more tanky, and that's after you do a setup turn. You can pick one enemy within 24 inches in the beginning of your opponent's shooting phase. All their ranged weapons gain hazardous. This is very situational, and I have never used it personally. But if you have going against something that has a lot of models with a whole bunch of weapons, so they're firing 2 to 3 weapons apiece, might be considered there, because that could just wipe out a squad. His last one is an orb, which adds 2 inch to Thousand Suns movements within 6 inches. This is more likely going to be used on turn 1 because you're able to deploy him so that he can hit as many things as he needs to with his 6-inch aura, move him to another spot in cover where he's affecting a few other things, and now they also get the plus 2 inches to their movement. His keywords, which could be important for some of these other abilities. He has Monster, Character, Epic Hero, Fly, Daemon, Primarch, Psyker, Chaos, Tzeentch, Magnus the Red. So the big ones here, Monster, Daemon, and Fly is always useful for deployment. He can just go over ruins. And with his Deep Strike ability, I personally have never Deep Striked him, but you could. He could be a rapid ingress threat with that. However, let's keep going, and now we're going to look at him in different detachments and how they look. So I'm going to do this in order of the detachments in the app. So first we have the Change Host of Deceit. So the detachment rule that applies to him is he gives rituals to the Lords of Change and Kairos, the demon psychers, in there. So they can cast rituals, as can Magnus. Stratagems that are important, you have 1 command point for Sulfureous Veil, which gives -1 to hit when something is shooting at him. Very useful. 2 CP, Deceptive Glamour. If he is in combat with something and so is a demon, the enemy must target the demon first. Useful, but 2 CP, not really. Magnus can probably tank more than the Lords of Change, the Screamers, the Pink Cores, unless you're just trying to make them target that. 1 CP, Chrono Sorceress Bleed. Whatever the enemy unit that is trying to charge Magnus now has -2 to the charge. Very useful, keeps him out of combat because Magnus has good combat, but his real strength is when he can shoot, move, cast rituals, and he picks when he charges. Having your enemy pick when they charge can be a huge downgrade for anything we're trying to do. Now, next detachment we're going over is Grand Coven. Detachment rule. At the beginning of your command phase, you're going to pick 1 for psychic attacks from your army to have. +1 to wound, devastating wounds, +6-inch range. You can only use them once each. So with this, +1 to wound, very useful. It just means you're going to be doing more damage with Magnus. And with the Gaze of Magnus and his strike profile already have devastating wounds, he doesn't necessarily need the devastating wounds. +6-inch range, gives him 30-inch range in shooting, which can be quite far. Reach out and touch someone. Now for the stratagems that work with him. He has a 1 CP Psychic Dominion, which gives him a 4-up field of pain against psychic attacks, and enemy psychic attacks have hazardous. This is only in the shooting phase and very useful in the mirror match because the 4-up field of pain can eat a lot of wounds, and hazardous could cause the enemy to just start losing some models. It is situationally useful, but anything that can make him more tanky for just 1 CP is useful, especially in certain matchups like Grey Knights would also not be a huge fan of the Psychic Dominion going against them. Next, you have 1 command point, Destined by Fate. So after you fail a save, you can make the damage 0. Now remember, for Melta guns, and if they have other damage modifiers, you do the change the characteristic first, so you'll change it to 0, and then the Melta modifier or other modifiers come in effect, so you still might be taking damage. But also, if you're in the -1 damage, if they add Melta 2, you're going to subtract 1 from that, so it's only going to be 1 still. 1 CP, Egotistical Power. You're going to pick one of the detachment buffs to apply to this unit and ignore the others. So, and you can use this so you can do +1 to wound every turn if you really wanted to. But if there's something like you need to get the +1 to wound, or you're just not going to be able, you need Magnus to hold this objective and just doesn't have the range to shoot at something, this is where you can specifically point out certain abilities to affect him, or go to other units. Like if you're in the devastating wound turn and you need Magnus to have +1 to wound, 1 CP, all of a sudden Magnus is +1 to wound, and his strike and shooting already have devastating wounds on the big damage profiles. The rest of your army still keeps the devastating wounds. Could be very useful. And then you have 1 CP, Desecration of Worlds. It makes one of your objectives sticky if you have a Psyker on it, so Magnus can fly to an unopposed objective, sit on it, claim it, sticky it, move off. he has the speed that he can just do that all over, especially in the late game if he is alive. 1 CP Arcane Focus, which is the bread and butter of this detachment. Not as useful for Magnus unless you're trying to avoid taking mortals, but it lets you reroll the psychic test before or after you channel the warp. Very useful. It's just, he has the +2, so you're probably not failing. And if you do fail, you could just use that to probably pass and probably get the higher of the 2 versions. Now, he has 2 CP Devastating Sorcery. This is also only in shooting. You're going to add 9 inches to the range and full hit and wound rerolls. So if you're not getting ritual support for Magnus and you just need something to die, or you have the +6 inches already and then you're +9 inches, you get +15 inches. So at 39 inches, Magnus can reach out, shoot something with full hit and full wound rerolls. Can be extremely damaging to your opponent. Grand Coven is great for Psychers. It is our character detachment. Apparently everything works with Magnus in this. So our next one is Hexwalk Thoroughband. I've been playing around with this detachment for a little while, trying to build some good list ideas. So far I haven't put Magnus in, but after making this, I might have to consider it. So if Magnus is in the flow, he's going to reroll wound rolls of 1. At strength 11 and strength 6, on preferred targets, he's probably wounding them on 2s or 3s, so the reroll 1's wounds are really good. But the big one is, if he's outside of the flow, he gets +1 to wound, which is even bigger. So Magnus can go out, push out, be a distraction cone effect, start just wreaking havoc on your opponent while you're establishing your own objectives so you can take over and have your flow of magic in those areas. Now, stratagems, you have a 1 CP, Warding Hex, which is going to be a sticky objective if you're within your flow of magic. Useful, but like I said, I kind of want to put Magnus moving forward more on this one. 1 command point, Wrath of the Doomed, is a fight on death on a 4-up, and you get +1 if you're in your flow. Yes, Magnus gets to fight back after death. Ideally, I'm not using it on him. Ideally, I have something else up there fighting. Push comes to shove, this does help and will work with him. And then 1 command point, Strands of Time, shoot or charge after fallback. If you end your fallback move in flow, you can do both. Now Magnus has a 14-inch or 16-inch move, so that's a 14-inch or 16-inch fallback. So you can probably fall back into your flow of magic, use this stratagem, shoot and charge with Magnus, and he is a heavy hitter. Doesn't matter if he's in a flow or not, just his data sheet alone, he will start picking up things. This just makes it so that they can't tie him up to kind of keep him in place. Our next stratagems we have are 1 command point for scoring Whip Flame. Rapids gain ignores cover and select 1 to not have the benefit of cover. So after you hit the target, you pick one of those targets and they don't get the benefit of cover. This is in shooting. Tzeentch's Firestorm already has ignores cover. Gaze of Magnus at AP 2. It could help with that, but generally our army has high enough AP or enough ignores cover in it that this stratagem just isn't the best. But it is an option we have. And now, probably one of my favorite is 1 command point, Kaleidoscopic Tempest. This is going to give Magnus stealth. So, you're not getting a bit of cover, but you get stealth on his body, so harder to hit. That's a great debuff. And if he is within the flow, you gain the benefit of cover. So this is smoke for Magnus in the flow, or just stealth. Great stratagem, very useful. Can possibly keep Magnus alive, especially when you combine it with the -1 damage. All of a sudden, Magnus is very, very tanky. Arguably one of the tankiest Primarchs, with the exception of Curse, Mortarion, because Nurgle is going to keep that to himself at all times. So now we're going to move on to our next attachment, Rubricate Phalanx. There's not a whole lot that helps Magnus in this. So we have an enhancement that if another sorcerer within 9 inches of Magnus for Arcane Thralls, Magnus can reroll his battle shocks. However, at Leadership 5, Magnus probably doesn't need the reroll battle shocks. Yeah. And then we only have one stratagem that helps Magnus, and that is Revenge of the Rubricate. After a Psyker dies, aka Magnus in this case, one Rubricate unit, so Scam Cult Terminators or Rubric Marines, may shoot at that unit as if you were a shooting phase. Much better when we have other things doing this, but I don't really... If Magnus is going out to die, he's probably not close to anything else. It's just, this detachment doesn't help or work with Magnus much. However, Magnus still beat stick, so you could still consider using him here. You're probably better off with other things. Our next one. Now this one's weird. A lot of these work with Magnus, not so much as Magnus turns them on, not so much as they help Magnus, but Magnus can turn them on to make other things better. This is synergy, and Magnus, being one of our tougher data sheets, is more likely going to be alive to do all of this. So, detachment rule, if Magnus is within 6 inches of a vehicle, they can reroll 1 hit, wound, and damage roll. Very useful for some of ours. And if Magnus is within 6 inches of a vehicle, they deadly demise on a 5-up. Magnus is going to be pushing forward at some point. Vehicles around him pushing forward will also probably be close to enemies, so this is a way to get even more mortal wounds. However, they are mortal wounds that will also hurt Magnus. The second bit is kind of iffy, but the first one can be big, especially with like Predator Annihilators, Predator Destructors, Forge Fiends, or even Mauler Fiends. Now our stratagems, we have one command point for Mutate Landscape. This one Magnus can do. It will sticky an objective and set a trap. So next time an enemy model moves onto the objective, on a 4-up, they take D3 mortals. Sticky objectives is nice. Having a trap there, we had thrown a lot of mortals around anyway. I'm not going to complain about having more mortals and still only being 1 CP. Our next one is one command point, Cyber Spirit Machinations. This is going to be for a vehicle within 6 inches of Magnus. After that vehicle falls back, it can shoot and charge. Very useful for, let's say, a Mauler Fiend with its short-range Meltas, or a Hellbrute, or even Secretar robots. They can fall back, flame something, and then charge something else. But they have to be around Magnus. So this is, again, pushing forward. This is a vehicle, this will be in a vehicle pressure list more than likely. One command point, Malevolent Animus. Vehicles within 6 inches. That vehicle ignores mods to its weapon skill, ballistic skill, hit. It just basically ignores all mods to rolls and tests that it will make. Very useful, but very situational. One command point, Ensorcelled Infusion. Vehicle within 6 inches. Their weapons all become psychic, which doesn't really give us a lot of benefits other than adding a keyboard that might have feel no pain somewhat against it. But they also get +1 to wound, which can be very useful. It will let your Forge Fiends punch up fairly well, and makes the Predator Annihilators just be able to kill tanks that much more effectively. Now, our last detachment we have is the Warp Meld Pact. The detachment rule doesn't really help him, so we just have these 2 stratagems. And this is, of course, our Spawn and Zangor detachment. So, one command point, Gift of Change. When a character dies, you're going to spawn 1 Chaos Spawn at starting strength 1. Okay. One command point, you get a spawn for them killing Magnus. It just doesn't feel great. Like, I'm taking an over 400 point model and replacing it with 1 spawn. It's probably just going to die immediately because whatever could kill Magnus could just wipe out a spawn. And then you have 1 command point, Blessed Transmutation. A Zangor's unit within 12 inches of Magnus will revive D3+1 model, so he can keep our battlefield full of bodies that are easily removable. We are the army of invuln saves, but we're not the 4-ups. We have a lot of 5-ups and 6-ups, and Zangors are just gonna keep dying. The D3+1 for 1 command point. Magnus just doesn't work very well in this detachment. So now we're going to go and I'm going to rank what I think of each one and give you some basic thoughts. So best detachment for Magnus. Grand Coven. It's the space wizard money detachment. It works with everything, works with Magnus, and he just gets better and better in it. It's one of the reasons why it's one of the big ones. The next one is a little weird. Hexwarp Thrallbearer. The detachment rule helps him. Most of the stratagems work with him, and it lets him just go around and be a beatstick. He doesn't really have to worry about the flow of magic, whereas everyone else kind of wants to either be in or out of it, depending on if you have rubrics attached or something else. But it just makes it so that he is able to do what he wants to do and still get support from the detachment. Next is the Change Host of Deceit. Now with Kairos and Lords of Change being that much better, maybe we put him in here. Now he does turn on the rule for those demons. However, the big one is he has some very, very useful stratagems there. A stealth stratagem, very useful. And then of course, the -2 to charge. Helps keep him alive against a lot of melee armies. All of a sudden, those Allosaurus Terminators or those other Terminators trying to charge him get -2, and now they're open so that we can charge them first. Vehicles or chaff trying to tie him up. He walks with it, but I don't know if he's ideal with it. Our next one is Warforged Cabal. He is a Thousand Sun Psyker model, so he will just turn on the detachment for all the vehicles you have laying around. And he can move around fairly quickly, so he can turn on whatever vehicles need to be turned on at that time. Our next one is Warp Meld Pact. He's not really helpful, but he does synergize with making a spawn, and it does allow you to revive models. It's just probably not going to be taking Magnus in there unless you just need him for the beat stick and the points. And last is Rubricate Phalanx. If you're not taking Terminators, you're not taking Rubric Marines, I guess you can play him in there. However, the detachment doesn't really help him, and he doesn't really help the detachment. You're better off just not playing Magnus and Rubricate Phalanx. Now this is a nice little short video. I talked about Magnus, and honestly, I love Magnus. He's such an amazing model to paint, and we know he is useful in a lot more detachments than people give credit for. Now, is he ideal? No. Outside of Grand Coven and maybe Hexwarp, he's not ideal. And even in Hexwarp, they have a lot of enhancements in there that work very well with Demon Princes that can basically make it so they punch up just as good as Magnus would have. And I'll probably cover that in some other video going over Waned and Foot Princes in Hexwarp Thrallbearer and different strategies and whatnot. Change Host of Deceit. He's still Magnus, still a big old beatstick. However, he takes up a lot of points, and you're probably going to put Kairos and Lord of Changes over him and support them with sorcerers that we have. Warforged Cabal, again, and Exalted Sorcerers on disc, Sorcerers, Infernal Masters. Also turn on all of those stratagems, and they work just as well as Magnus there. Warp Meld Pact, you're going to be taking Zangor Shaman. Maybe a couple Sorcerer or two, but Magnus just isn't in there for it. And Rubricate Phalanx, if you put 30 Terminators and Magnus in a list, you have nothing else. You're better off just running the Phalanx with the Rubric Marines, with the Terminators, and maybe some Zangor and Leiden for some screening or play on secondaries. Now, that's all for today, folks. I want to say happy wargaming. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, suggestions, or content ideas, please let me know. And like, comment, and subscribe. Happy wargaming. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.